Evening.
Evening. Can you hear me this time?
Yep, you're still there. Yeah, we had technical
Okay,
difficulties.
brilliant. Yes, gotta love beta software for recording day.
Yeah.
It's always the smart way to go, especially while using new features too.
Oh,
Gotta
well.
love it.
Ah, it's been a little bit of a
Interesting
week,
day.
internationally. Yeah, interesting day, interesting
Yeah,
week. What's happened for
yeah.
you?
I got the alert on my phone about Peterson's court thing today.
Ah,
His
yeah.
response to it or whatever, which was interesting. I like that he's going to war with the federal government over there.
Yeah.
Ain't that
When
nice?
when I saw them starting down that route, I was like, you kind of picked the wrong guy to attack here.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I think he's the right guy for them to attack from our perspective.
Mm.
Hmm.
Well, if they're largely driven by their unconscious as people, then someone picked it.
Yeah.
Something picked him. But I don't know if it was them.
Agreed. Just like that guy who wrote that song, Richmond North of Richmond. That seems to have.
Don't know that one. Sorry.
Okay. That's a part of the news cycle you've missed then. Okay. Guy
I
wrote.
don't do news anymore.
True. Well, this guy wrote a song, a small town musician in the US called Richmond North of Richmond, uh, with lyrics like, oh, what is them? Overtime hours for bullshit pay, guys putting themselves 6 feet under because the world just keeps kicking themselves when they're down, and things like that. Sung beautifully and emotionally. It's just him and a guitar and some dogs and some microphones in his yard, family farm, something like that. He's been living in a trailer, and last I saw it had 30 million views. And it
Uh,
debuted at number one on the charts as a music track.
oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the internet sometimes, though.
And he turned down an $8 million record deal.
Hmm. Could be an interesting story. Can't wait to hear his interview.
And he's religious in the good sense that
Hmm.
he's not fundamentalist, thou shalt do what I think is right. He's be a good person type religious.
I could use a few more of those, I suppose.
Yeah, and things like other bits of the song were about people uh, being divided in the sense of pitted against each other.
Hmm.
And he was a miner at one point, and he's got a line in the song about politicians caring more about miners on some island than the miners in the rest of the country, and it's a bit of play on words in it, but
Oh, it took me a second to get that.
yeah,
That's good.
yeah, and
Yeah, it sounds about right.
of course, then people are shouting at him for being QAnon adjacent because saying that he's saying there's all this child trafficking. It's like, no, you kind of heard what you subconsciously were thinking in that line, but at the same time, you
It's
probably
probably written that way. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it could be written
They
either
did a
way.
masterful they did a masterful job psyoping that Pizzagate stuff. They just all of those documents and emails that were released, they just fucking psyoped that away so so well. Gotta give them a round of applause for that. And now no one even knows the story about how that Pizzagate came to be, which is where the QAnon stuff comes from.
Uh,
And how it was just entirely based on documents and communications by these people. No one knows that. No one looks at those documents.
yeah.
It's insane how they. It's amazing what you can do when you have the media apparatus and no one reads anything for themselves. You sell them anything.
Mm. Well, one of the US presidential candidates, Vivek Ramaswamy, who I'm mispronouncing
Oh,
his name, but
he's real interesting. I like him.
yeah, he's doing the podcast circuit, not the
Mm,
TV circuit. He's doing the podcasts and talking to people, and someone will come up
yeah.
against him with a an argument or a point, and he'll be like, he'll he will take it as a logical argument and do his logical argument in reply. It's not just, oh, here's a bunch of rhetoric. It's
Yeah, it wasn't scripted.
yeah, yeah.
Like I've heard people go on the podcast circuit who are running for campaign before, and it's within 5 minutes of listening to it, you can just immediately check out like, oh, this person's not going to answer any questions. They're going to do the standard TV spiel, writing, reading off whatever. What was that line from Orwell? Orwell had a line about politicians using words like pre-built houses,
Oh,
pre-built hen houses, or something.
yeah.
And it's like they don't actually say anything; they just speak in prefabricated kits for hen houses, or something like that. And that's what it is. They get a question and then they give a scripted answer. You get a question, they give a scripted answer. Ugh. The only people I've seen who haven't done that were Vivek Ramaswamy, I think. Probably butchering that, but he's got a real good chance. I like him. And um, the RFK on the other side.
Mm.
It's Robert, isn't it? Yeah. RFK Jr. on the other side. He also did an interview and he was pretty straight to the point, I noticed. And weirdly enough, way back in the day, Bernie Sanders. He went on Rogan once and I listened to that and he was actually genuinely himself for the whole thing. He wasn't giving pre-built cut speeches,
Mm.
you know. And like, yeah, he's wrong about a lot of stuff, but he believes what he says. And he was actually genuine and himself in that interview. And I gotta give him credit for that. There's
Yeah.
very few people who will take that risk. And I think the ones who do take that risk have the highest chance of winning in this day and age. Everyone's still playing to the TV circuit like anyone cares.
Yeah. Just thinking about some of the events and things I've heard in the context of our discussions. Like, one of the points was something I heard in one of Peterson's interviews in response to the court decision against him. And he was saying that in 5 years, no one will want to admit they were ever in favor of trans surgery for minors and
Yeah, oh,
more
yeah,
than that. But he
for
pointed out
sure.
that it's like a minor, by the UN definition, cannot give informed consent to a surgery, and especially a dramatic one like this. Like medical surgeries are done on the basis of necessity, like medical
Yeah.
necessity,
The point
and
he said was sterilization
yeah, yeah,
of children is a crime against humanity.
by the UN definition,
Which it is. You don't need a government panel to tell you that that's a crime against humanity.
yeah.
Right up there with like human sacrifice. We don't want any of that. What did you think about his other call in that? He made a call for people to go step up and get involved with political parties. What do you think about that?
The one, it might have been the same one that I'm thinking of, but
It was from today. Yeah.
the call that I remember him talking about was go get involved with your local political parties because they're so starved for people that they'll just grab you and you'll get stuff to do and you'll learn a ton, and then if you work at it and get competent, you'll climb the ladder amazingly
Yeah.
quickly. Like the
Doors will open.
yeah. Oh, it's like something else I heard elsewhere previously, that the bar is so low these days that
I mean, yeah, just look at them.
yeah, yeah, look at
Like
your
that was, I
competition.
think, the first conversation, first show, whatever we did. Half of it was just ranting about how childish these people were, that they're stupid. I think anyone off the street, competent person, could beat them out easily. Like the fact that they're still doing the 30-second clips for TV
Hmm.
in the internet age.
Yeah, I
But
was
I mean directly you.
hmm.
What do you think about getting involved? You specifically.
if I take my current time constraints, as in single parent with other commitments, out of the equation, getting involved politically would be daunting. Taking into account the idea that I don't need to have a barrow to push when I get into it, except for wanting more competence in the system, would make it easier in the sense of as you become exposed to politics and start to understand it, you'll form your opinions because you'll hear the arguments, the reasons why things are certain ways or why people think they should be different ways, and then
And
you'll.
going into it without a preset ideology of all the answers to all the questions is probably really healthy for the system.
Yeah.
Because I think that's very rare.
It's funny because I seem to. Now, this could come off really arrogant, but I seem to have some ability to uh, become the center of a group that I'm part of.
Mm.
And yeah, that can come off arrogant, but I think it's
How
what
do you
some
put
of
yourself down so much?
I
It's a
think it's what
it's a
people
good
talk
trait.
about as leadership potential. It's like the ability to be part of a group and say things that people will listen to.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how socially awkward or weird you are. If you're the most interesting person in the group will naturally gravitate towards giving you their attention.
Hmm.
It's not something people can just resist. You know, you could be the quietest person in the world, but when you have things to say that captivate people, they're going to listen to you no matter what. And even if you don't want to be the person who gets the center of attention, you'll end up with it if you are, the most informed or the wisest or the person in the space who has the thing to say that no one's heard before,
Hmm. I think if I
regardless of whether you want it or not.
yeah, I'm just thinking if I were to go into politics, there is a few skill sets I would need to gain, but and a sort of a few categories of yeah skill sets, full knowledge of areas that I'm entirely lacking, things like that. But allowing for that, hmm, it's not
Feels
something
like
I've
you're
considered
putting
deeply.
them up on a bit of a pedestal. These people who are in political offices, small or great, are greater than I.
There is certainly a there's a lot of work for a start that goes into it in the sense of long
Mm.
hours and constant hard work while in Parliament to handle all the necessary bureaucracy. And they do the people who are, although that also depends on the system, I guess, and the people who play those games deserve the recognition of the skill and effort that playing those games takes. Whether they are playing those games with good intent, malintent, selfish intent is a worthy consideration, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it takes hard work and effort to get there. In terms of raw intelligence, it seems more like crystallized intelligence that's important, as in you spend a while learning stuff and then you've learnt it and you can apply it, and it becomes rather formulaic in terms of how you respond. Although, of
Seems like
course,
a seems like a bad strategy for governance if that's the way the system's set.
I think that in some senses, because of the size of what you're governing, a degree of rigidity within that system is good. And like a dictatorship can respond very quickly and dynamically to new situations because it all flows from the top. A kingdom or a form of dictatorship.
Uh,
But it can also respond rapidly in the wrong direction. And I think the personal ossification can slow that down to a manageable level. Like you need a certain amount of effort to bring together a country and move things in ways that aren't going to be totally chaotic. Like you need to propose ideas,
that's,
have them voted on, and so on.
that's where you get the keys to power problem.
Mm.
That um, a person who has that power because those below them have given it to them.
Hmm.
And whether or not they want to do good is irrelevant because what they need to do is make sure that those below them are happy to keep them in that position. Otherwise, they'll be ousted.
Yeah.
And in a democracy, you have many keys to power, so many people to please. In a dictatorship, you have few. But just because you have few does not mean that you have greater freedom to act, because you still have to keep those beneath you, generals, military, police, lawmakers, tax collectors, whatever, on your side, or else we'll just replace
Hmm.
you. You're not that free to act. And those who have, who would seem like the most totalitarian grip on power, really don't.
There was something I saw talking about North Korea in that sense, pointing out that the last two generations of Kim Jong Il's family have essentially been murdered, and he's well
Mm-hmm.
aware of that fact and the necessity of keeping the appropriate people happy.
Yeah, because he doesn't run the country.
Hmm.
They do. He's the figurehead. Same in a democracy. You have, 350 parliament members or whatever that you have to get on your side. Well, half that lot, whatever. But the point stands. People have to like you and what you're doing. If they don't, because you want to go in a radical direction, you're not getting anywhere. So things tend towards slow, gradual process, which is why even in democratic societies or dictatorial ones, they're always behind the curve of culture. Because they have to
Hmm.
wait for the sea change. And then being that people in political power are generally, you know, older and more crystallized in intelligence and not checked out of the world quite a bit. The delay between environment or culture shift and political action is ridiculous. I'm not saying that's a good thing. It'd be good to shake it up a bit, but that's how
Yeah.
it seems.
In our upcoming election, I was thinking about who to vote for because the question came up in the office, and one of the possibilities I was seriously considering was, you know how there's lots of parties who never get any amount of votes on the electoral roll? The one that comes to mind was the Bill and Ben party, which basically a joke, but thought of voting for the down the list parties as, in one sense, a vote of no confidence in the top ones, and in another sense, a vote for just a bit of chaos in the system. Like total chaos in the sense of wipe
I
out
feel
the
like we got
entire.
enough chaos at the moment, don't you?
There, the type of chaos I would hope to add in is fresh perspectives with power
Agreed.
to make a difference. I'm thinking of
The with power is the important part there.
yes, yes.
Your down the list candidates aren't going to do that.
That's true. Yeah. So the other one to consider was top, which last election their um,
Mm.
stance was, or their campaigning point was evidence-based policies, and I have to have a look at them for this
I
election.
remember I went to some of their meetings and met the guy. in the election before that. And I remember that they were pro UBI and they wanted to get rid of all the cats in the country because
Hmm.
birds lives matter or something. Maybe they've changed their stance a little bit, but they were very, very redistributionist. And he effectively wanted to get into parliament by paying everyone to vote for him through UBI.
Yeah, evidence can say whatever you want it to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Science is pretty good at manipulating studies.
Hmm.
And you can just find post hoc justifications for whatever you want. I think what needs to happen is a shake-up of one of the parties, a reform, a restructure, a new leader.
Hmm.
Which brings me back to my point earlier. Peterson made a call for the average person to get up and get involved in politics. And we've talked about a few times about how the smartest people in the society are checking out, going off into the woods or, becoming dock rangers or farmers like I. Um, because the system's getting too corrupt. I couldn't be a doctor. I get, fired. I couldn't be a lawyer. I'd be disbarred. And I probably can't be a psychologist until that field is reformed because I get my license stripped. But perhaps it's time for the unique, creative, and intelligent people who have been rolling their eyes at the system and doing their own thing for long enough to step forward and start changing things. Because if we continue to let the people living in the last century run our policies and our governments, we're not going to end up very well. One party hasn't learnt from the communist catastrophe, and the other party is acting like it's the 1950s and they're conservatives in the US. Neither is helping.
There's a part on it that okay. A step towards that kind of action, I think, links into what we were discussing last week, along with a couple of other aspects, which various thoughts flying around my head, and I can't grab onto all of them at once. But the idea of, you could say, having a spine in terms of the way you act. And I've been going through a process of trying to, in the broad sense, integrate my shadow. In the more defined sense, find my potential for aggression, and which isn't just physical aggression, it's the potential to act aggressively. Someone can be aggressive in a debate and so on. And I think personally, I would need that kind of strength to engage in this kind of action. And I think a lot of people are possibly in similar positions because of the way our society treats masculine aggression and strength.
Mm.
And I suspect I'm a bit of a unusual case in some psychological aspects, but that's it's also possible that there are a lot of people who aren't that dissimilar. So I'll dive into what I found through introspection over the past week, and then we'll go from there. Um, so last week we'd talked about the need for me to find the potential for violence within myself and confront it. And when I went digging, so to speak, and sort of visualized myself in violent scenarios, and there's plenty of visual source material for that from movies, it's like the idea of. Now, I should caveat this with this was visualizations performed as an experiment to gauge my emotional reactions and awareness of the moral implications of undertaking such acts. But things like if I imagine myself committing gruesome violence, the emotional reaction wasn't strong. And the conclusion I've come to is that now here we're getting into interpretation, so I'll be interested in your feedback on it. But I think I've got a long term decision to be what I perceive as good, which has been internally defined as basically harmless, which I'm now working my way down my mental hierarchy, changing because of the evidence that harmless is not good. Harmless is just powerless and pushed over. And these sort of things take a long time after you make a conscious decision. There's a lot of digging and rewiring to do. And
It's going to be a peaceful person.
I would like to be peaceful, but
It's
I,
the instinct, right?
yeah, but like one of the areas where I've found it easiest to integrate the potential for violence is in the idea of protection. Like, okay, here are children, and thoughts or a desire to do violence to anyone who would harm those children in a immediate threat sense. And like that's relatively easy to integrate, but trying to become aware of and not just process away uh other potentially violent emotions, but be aware of them and be aware that they may have value. Like one that I realized I've been processing away in that sense, which I think is right to process away in some clear senses, but it's part of the process to bring it up and look at it honestly. Like when my son is not being cooperative, he's 5. It happens, of course, he's not cooperative. He wants to keep playing, he wants to have this or that or the other thing. I realized that I had perceived the temptation to cower him into submission because and the temptation is real because that would be easier. I have not done this and have no desire to do this. I want him to be strong because that's an interesting way to phrase it. I want him to be strong so that he can live his life. But at the same time, as a parent, having a strong child who doesn't just go to bed when you tell them with limited parenting skills, as everyone has, is a bit more difficult. But
Yeah,
like,
it's the challenge.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the temptation and the anticipated pleasure in dominating someone weaker
Mm,
is
that's it.
observable. And I talked about not having lit the flames of rage, so I don't have a fire to contain. Um, I habitually dampen out any sparks I perceive, and that's what I'm trying to rewire at the moment because those flames of aggression are also a source of strength, and I'd categorize them as always bad and destructive.
Okay. Here's okay. This might appeal to your rational mind. I just finished reading Eric Neumann's The Origin and History of Consciousness again. I think we've talked about it before. And one thing I picked up this time round at the end of the book was the development of evil, effectively. Not just as a concept, but as a spirit, a part of the psyche that could be evil and commit actions. The developmental step in human evolution. And he made a point which I found rather striking, that was the development of evil was a necessary development to have the ego part of the consciousness be independent from the group. That we evolved in group unconscious behavior, the collective unconscious. And that is how we spent the majority of our evolution. But for an individual ego to step forward and proclaim that they are individual and go against the group in defiance is the same spirit as the spirit of evil. That those two come hand in hand in terms of evolution. That one could not stand up to the collective without that spirit. And he makes a case that that is why it was developed. I'm dramatically oversimplifying it. I barely have a handle on this. It's one of the most difficult books I've ever read. That's why I did it a second time, and I still don't quite have a handle on it, but getting better. And I thought about it, and I meditated on that instinct in myself. And I think he's right. That when we've talked about before the feeling of aggression that comes to saying no, standing up against the group, it's the same feeling as the sadistic evil part of me. It's the same thing, the same spirit who's active in that moment. So if you were looking for, what is the necessity or the value of evil, we couldn't be conscious and individuals without it.
Something
Because we wouldn't have any will, any libido to resist the collective without it.
Something I've observed of my own how do I put this? I've observed of my own sense of aggression when I've deliberately inflamed it, which for people who struggle to control it more, like yourself, they probably wouldn't need to do that, but because it's not naturally strong. I'm naturally a negotiator and I think I remember one personality test. It was the diplomat or something, like someone who would negotiate a truce and calm things down rather than the other way around. But when I
Because of your childhood. I thought I'd slip that in there for people listening. If you had the natural tendency to negotiate your way out of problems rather than use aggression or frustration or anger, it's because that's what you experienced from parental figures when you were young. They negotiated with you. And, thank God, you want to be like you in this conversation and not like me, whose anger response to like everything that's mildly frustrating was a result of a parent who did that to them. Apologies for interrupting. I just wanted to drop that in there.
fair point, fair point. And I do agree that I would prefer to be a peaceful man learning to be violent when necessary than a violent man struggling to learn to be peaceful. It's like it's less destructive to go one way than the other.
There's a line about that about was it, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to the peaceful thing because I do have something to say on that. Anyway,
Yeah.
let you
But
say your piece.
the point I was making was that the sense of aggression, it's very much like fire in the sense that if unattended, it will burn and consume and continue going. It's like there seems to be a need to. Oh, there's a character in a book who is described as a brute who overrules his fists every second. Like he thinks with his fists and overrules them constantly. And I got that same sense of temptation to violence, and then you pay attention to it, and it's not. You described it as the darkness wanting to work toward the light, and it's something like that. That the what the flames want is not destruction, but their nature is to consume. And when used with consciousness and attention, they will work within that and can become powerful strength. But like all powerful forces, if you don't control it, it's deadly. Like that applies in physics and engineering just as much as here, and is probably easier to think about there. That very high pressure steam at high temperature, like you contain that stuff. You do not let it escape because it will kill you and cook you before you even know it's there. But at the same time, you can do a lot of great work with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely don't want a force of that nature to be unconscious
Hmm.
because it'll invade your conscious life if it's not recognized.
Yeah, and I'm fortunate that that I need to elevate it consciously to give it power.
You want to go and voluntarily find the dragon. You don't want it to come after you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I still want to come back to that original question.
yep.
I'll say the thing on peace, which is interesting. You want to be a peaceful person. And a question about that is if you are a non violent person, if you are harmless, say, whether or not your life is peaceful, your existence, is not up to you. It's up to other people. Whereas if you are aggressive or violent person, then whether or not you're peaceful is up to you and what boundaries you choose to just put around your peace. There's a line from Iron Man that I always liked, which was peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy. And for most of human history, I imagine it was like that. You want to have an environment of peaceful and prosperity for you and your family and your tribe. That meant being willing to dispose of those who threatened that peace. And if you didn't, then there'd be no peace at all. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I've got what maybe internal resistances or maybe difficulties understanding elements of it because of a lack of
I want
combat
to focus on
experience, you could say.
the resistance part. What's resisting that idea, that concept?
The idea makes perfect sense, and the logical brain came in with the point that, oh, it's easy to conceptualize being strong and dangerous in a combative physical sense, but you can be just as dangerous in a intellectual sense, like in the way Peterson's being to the certain political factions that he is uh, offending by the way he acts. Because he's not going after them as such. He's walking his path, and if they come to fight him, then he's damn well ready. But
He
he's not.
wouldn't be able to do that unless he was capable of real violence.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the bit that I think when I said resistance, it wasn't quite the right word because what I've got is a blank spot. Like I don't know how to translate like being able to throw a punch into being that kind of fearsome. Ooh, fearsome.
Hmm.
Like someone who inspires fear. That's
That is what it is.
hmm.
Yeah, you will not. It's not a if you do this, a bad thing will happen to you. The it's selling it. It's not just about being cold and logical of, if you cross this line, I will respond with physical force. It's the don't you try it or I'll break everything that you are. It's inspiring fear and aggression.
Hmm.
I
I'm
don't know.
thinking there was
I don't have that sketched out either.
there's a thing that came to mind in the sense of that the warrior in a garden idea.
Mm,
A short story I read that someone had written inspired by some video game. The very powerful and violent main character had some time ago crash landed on this peaceful alien planet, and they'd just sort of let him have a farm and live. And then, sometime before the story takes place, someone had invaded, and he had obliterated them. And then the story took place sometime later, where these aliens had been fighting to stop another invading race from getting to the planet where he was, and they'd just attacked and said, "Ha! Now we've got you. We've seized your final bastion." And the alien who was defending was like, "You poor sods. We tried to stop you." And because he knew that this warrior who only wished to be peaceful, um, the scene shifted to him. He's on his farm. He sees a battle in orbit or something, and he cries out in frustration, walks over to his barn, snaps the chain across the door with his bare hands, walks in, and there's some power armor or some equivalent, and then he goes off to fight because he doesn't want to fight,
mm.
but it's who he is.
Reminds me of the romance in the Marvel movies between what is it, Bruce Banner and the spy chick,
Yep,
whatever, Black Widow.
Black Widow. Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a line about what is it, all my friends are fighters, and here comes this guy who spends his life avoiding the fight because he knows he'll win. But he doesn't always avoid the fight.
Hmm.
When it's time to, he does, and then he wins. But he doesn't go out and seek it like the others do. He doesn't revel in it. He doesn't. Yeah, I don't know.
I guess I'm wanting the.
I think
Hmm.
to bring it back to where we started,
Yep.
that if you wanted to develop the part of you that could engage in conflict and say thrive in that environment, and you wanted to do it in a way that didn't involve you literally doing cage fights or something,
Hmm.
because it seems to me that introspection might only get you so far here
Yeah.
because you're continually referencing this blank spot. Um, not just for you, but for anyone who has this problem of I don't want to step up and step forward because I don't know if I could handle it. I don't know if I'm capable. I think if you wanted to experience some real conflict and get stronger in the process of it, maybe stepping forward into the political scene at the moment is a good idea. You reference this as a concern about not being capable enough to take this on. But that's certainly an arena, and it's an arena of words and minds. And it's not a peaceful one at the moment. So perhaps that is exactly the kind of fire needed to forge the path that you're looking for, rather than it being a reason for you not to do it because, I'm too scared to stand up or whatever equivalent. I'm not saying that of you, but more of people in general. Or maybe you should anyway, because then you'll realize that you shouldn't be afraid. Well, not of speaking.
Yeah,
You certainly
because
should be afraid of staying silent.
I'm just comparing the idea of a street fight versus a debate confrontation, and they feel similar in a sense
We've seen
of
our we've seen our fair share of political debates in the last few years that were effectively knife fights in the street. People don't play fair. I mean, just think about some of the interviews Peterson's done.
hmm, it's the same spirit. It's the this isn't coming consciously, so I don't have it all sketched out, but it's like the I will take you down using all the tools at my disposal. And it's a game that's played with smiles and subtle language and so on, but it's in some ways it's a fist fight's easier because it's honest. It's like I want to hit you with my fist, and you want to stop me.
Yeah, there's no deception, no manipulation,
Yeah, or any
no trick or
deception
trap.
is momentary. It's like I think this way and then I punch you, and then it's like and then
It's not veiled in compassion.
yeah, ooh, that's hang on a minute.
That come out a bit more barbarous than I intended, but that's that. Mm,
Ooh,
couple
just
statement there.
just a minute. The veiled and compassion one. That oh, I default assume the best in people and assume good intentions.
Might do that in the political arena.
Yeah, and I'm just hmm. Yeah, because in a fist fight, it's like you can't really assume good intentions. You wonder how far the person in front of you is willing to go. Are they a berserker who will chew your ear off and jump on your corpse? Or are they someone who's just a bit worked up and needs to get it out of their system with a few punches? Or just feels like they need to show off a little bit and will either back down if you show you've got some gumption or give a few half-hearted hits and then walk off.
They can't betray you.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas if you're fighting someone who's pretending to be compassionate, then there is, as you say, that potential for betrayal, and also the is the which words do I trust? Yeah, there's. I feel like I've got issues with that. With
There's
the,
real evil at play in that environment. And you could come face to face with someone who is truly malevolent and wants to do you in.
I've got
And
it,
there's not many other places in our society where that's the case.
and they could even like that environment can do you in a worse way than a fist fight. Assuming you don't die in the fist fight from injuries, you get a bit injured, you get a broken bone maybe, and then you heal and you go back to work and life goes on. but assuming no big bad head injuries or something. But in the political sphere, with cancel culture, there is an intent and ability to take away someone's livelihood. And if things get really underhand, it's like stories of um, women who, through uh, immaturity or a desire to manipulate, or both, have accused men of raping them or acting improperly towards them, and have then destroyed that guy's life, um, divorce, no custody of kids, and so on. And then later it comes out, yeah, it was all made up, but the damage is done. Like
That's evil.
yeah,
There's no two ways about that.
the fact that it's evil
And the
committed.
chilling effect is the point. The fact that that is one of the reasons that would make you hesitate to step forward is exactly the point of why they do it. Oh, I can't do that. I won't risk myself. Someone else will. It's that line that he had. Any civic responsibility, political responsibility that you do not take up for yourself will be taken up by tyrants who want to use it against you. You don't take that seat on the school board or your local council, you can bet that a psychopath will. And they'll take it because they want to put you down. And you weren't there to stop them by being a good person and doing your responsibility to help keep your nation, your people afloat, to protect them from the people who want power for power's sake. Perhaps it's time that the people who don't necessarily want to do that, people who want to just do their lives and do a good job and be an engineer or a doctor or whatever else, perhaps it's time that they come forward and do something. Else it'll be the unemployed psychopaths who want to. And there'll be no one to run against them.
I'm wondering if a bunch of other stuff too. It seemed to multi-thread my mind, much to my own confusion. But uh, going off the suspicion of having something uh, autism spectrum, like low end, definitely. It's not high end by any means, but as someone who's probably on the more autistic half of engineers, I would guess. And engineers as a whole tend to be a bit in that direction. I think I have some degree of it, and I wonder if that leads to some of the discomfort in social situations like that, because the understanding that I have of what's happening is conscious rather than unconscious. Like for someone who will see and understand a social situation instinctively, they will feel uncomfortable about one person or not trust another person or get a bad feeling or a good feeling and so on. And it all flows from that. And it might be a misapprehension of mine, but it feels like that would make it easier in some ways. But I might be all wrong about this, of course, but it feels like it might be harder because I can look at it and interpret. I can look at movie characters and tell what they're feeling, in the sense of what the character's feeling, and put it all together. Apparently easier than other people. I can look at people and analyze their behavior, and I can read, if I pay attention to facial expressions, I can read them reasonably well. But it's a
without being
conscious thing.
caught by the status hierarchy.
Well, I'm playing the game consciously. Well,
Which
no,
means it's not manipulating you.
how do I put it? I'm watching the game without knowing the rules very well. So it's like you can see someone cheating if you don't know the rules necessarily, because you don't get distracted by the things that everyone else watches. Like, um, the magician waves his hand around, and you don't know that that's where you're meant to look. So you see him slip his hand behind his back, his other hand.
There's a good example of if you have two people arguing
Hmm.
and you film it and then you mute them and you just watch it without hearing the words, you'll understand more about what's happening than if you hear the words as well.
Yeah, I guess that sort of sums it up. Yeah.
I think, well, you may think of that being in some ways disadvantage to playing the standard game. My counterpoint would be probably, but I think we could both agree that what our system of governance and politics needs is people who aren't playing that standard game.
Hmm.
We need a shake up. We need new people with, well, vision, for one. The fact that we can have political candidates running for office with no vision is astounding to me. Nothing, no vision, nothing inspiring about them or what they're trying to do at all. Only catastrophizing on one side and then, let's make the economy good on the other. If you want to be the person who stands out, you can't play the same game as everyone else. And what we need in the political space is people who stand up, who are themselves genuine and don't play the political game. In essence, what we need in politics is not politicians. We need average people. Now, clearly, we want the best and the brightest and the ones with the most visionary ideas, but we don't need more politicians.
So,
We've had enough of the middle managers.
yeah,
We need CEOs now.
I've just been sort of running through a sort of how I would want to be prepared for going to, say, public debates, where I wanted to, say, ask an incisive question and get something out of the answer. And one of the things that I was thinking I would want to have mastered is the standard logical fallacies. Like, logic's been around for a long time, and the ways that humans tend to screw with it have been around so long they have names in ancient Latin.
Mm. So you can point them out and expose people who play games.
Yeah, well, definitely getting to that point. But first off, like, ask a question, remember or record the answer, and then tease it apart. And watching public debates might be a good way to practice this. Just tease apart, okay, what did they actually say? And categorize the words like, okay, this word doesn't have much logical content. It's a warm feeling word. They're trying to say a feel good thing. Because when I dig down into that word, I can't find much in the way of definition. It's like we want fairness in our society. Okay, that's a warm feeling word. which is on the face of it good, what do you mean exactly? And when you drill down into it, it's like we want um, less unhappiness. It's like, okay, sure, but what do you mean as a leader in the country? What do you plan to do? Not just what is your fuzzy goal. And being able to pull the answers apart like that in the context of your question and sort of deconstruct the game. I guess because the political game is
That's it.
played. I'm also trying to
Don't play the game. Flip it on its head.
now. I don't know what the game is, so I'm trying to understand what it is that I'm not playing in a sense. But
Okay, I can see. I see where you're coming from. But yeah, um,
because the
the
game,
game is dishonesty, effectively. It's manipulating questions to attack the other person. It's manipulating your answers to make yourself sound good or put down the other person and to manipulate the emotions of the listeners to vote for you. That's the game.
so would it be fair that very little to none of it is actually about the content? It's
Yes.
about
Yeah.
the
Yeah, like
the
completely.
yeah the feeling of it. The I managed to look like I took down your point while still being grammatically correct.
Yeah, you could pick any politician in any election over the last, I don't care, however long. And you go to someone and ask them, which would you go for, this person or this person? And they'll tell you. And then you go, cool. What's a single policy that they ever had? And almost no one will ever be able to answer you anything. It was a guy who did that with Obama. Everyone's like, oh my God, I love Obama. It's like, awesome. Can you name one thing that he's ever done? And no one can
Hmm.
because people don't pay attention to that. They get played through their emotions. They make you feel this thing. Hope. You look at me, you think hope. Vote for me because hope.
Well,
And that does it.
that's a content-free one if I ever heard one. It's like, okay,
Yeah, hope for what? More
oh,
drone strikes. Yeah.
even the word hope, it's like
Yeah, it's
hope.
manipulative.
Yeah, it
Hope
used
and
to
change or
mean
something.
a determination to make the best of a bad situation. Like, I have hope. I have the determination to make the best of a bad situation. And now it's like, I hope it'll work. I hope something will happen. I hope things will be
Mm-hmm.
nice. It's like, it's wishing
Yeah,
for an
things will
outcome.
work out, won't they?
Yeah, it's wishing for an outcome over which you have no agency. And
Mm.
it's like, no, I don't hope for an outcome. I would I wish for certain outcomes, and I have the determination to make the best of my situation. And I feel like I should be standing up more for the outcomes that I want, although I'm also very confused about the outcomes that I want. So, frankly, listening to the debates and deconstructing the arguments of both sides seems like a good place to start because if you don't know where you
I think that
stand,
I think
listening,
that's really valuable. So
not knowing where you stand.
yeah, not having an answer for everything. I've thought about this
Hmm.
for a while that one of the best leaders of a parliament you could ever have is someone who doesn't actually have fixed opinions on those things. They go, what are we going to do about immigration? Rather than going, oh, I know, we're going to do this. They go, I don't know. Give me like 15 different experts from this area. I want some border patrol people. I want some small business people. I want some large business people. I want some people who work for minimum wage, and I want some CEOs. I want some economists, and I want some lawyers, and I want them all to give me their advice, and then I'll figure it out. Rather than like, you know, oh, we need more because immigration's good, or we need less because those people bad.
Hmm.
Having fixed ideas on things isn't actually super helpful when you're trying to respond to the environment and steer a ship. If the person running the country isn't willing to learn from anyone, they're not the person who should be running the country. What you want is someone who can call on every expert on the planet to help come and solve problems. Because, if you're a prime minister of a nation, you can get a meeting with most anyone who's an expert in their field. And to not do that and to base your policies on your own personal opinions is insane. You could have the top economist on the planet fly out and you could have, an all-day meeting with them for planning things. But people don't do that. They just go, oh, I know, well, we need more taxes. Or, we need less. Or we'll do this, whim, or I was raised in this political opinion and this is the rhetoric I've heard for my life, so we'll do that. I mean, you have to campaign on something, I suppose, but still, there's something to be said about that flexibility that it doesn't seem like anyone exercises.
Oh, sorry, getting over a bug.
There's a fair bit going around this winter.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I
so
think.
yeah,
I was just going to say, I think that these are the reasons why average people need to stand up and do more.
yeah, and it gives me another avenue to explore aggression in, which is possibly more aligned with my personality. Like the idea of, I wonder if there
If
are
you were going to
debating.
volunteer for a party in this country, what would you volunteer for? Or like at least go and meet them and talk about the possibility of getting involved.
I think to choose a party, you have to have an opinion about which party to choose. Well, you could go
That doesn't
volunteer for
mean
multiple.
that doesn't mean that you have to be aligning yourself with political opinions. You could
Hmm.
say have an opinion on which party to choose because you ruled out the others for reasons of insanity.
Hmm.
Why do you want to volunteer with us? I think you're the most likely to be reformed. That's the reason.
Yeah. You're the least crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see with some major changes to your structure and your politics, you could actually be a reasonable party. And I don't see that happening anywhere else. So I'm here.
One more close to home place to start might be, oh, find out how the school administration is structured and how, like, we don't have. Do we have school boards in this country? I don't know. Find out that sort of stuff.
Um, I think so. I think that there's yeah, I think so because the principal for one of the primary schools in this little one of the primary school in this little town is getting replaced, and I think that's got something to do with a small governing board for that school in particular,
Hmm.
and I'm sure there's a district board that oversees them. I mean, we have health boards, you know, like Canterbury District Health Board or whatever, so there's got to be an education board in the same style. They're both government run anyway.
Yeah, because that would be a nice sort of close to home, relevant, immediate effect, single voice means something type place to at least listen. And another
Yeah, I
another
think
thing to do is
it
like
would be a good start.
learn the structure of how
Oh,
meetings are run, because I know that's a
I
sort of
was
well established thing.
Yeah, that is actually a big thing to learn. I worked at a bit of that and done some secretary kind of stuff for little groups, and that was rather eye opening in a lot of ways. I was sort of pushing the political thing particularly because of this year's upcoming election in our
Hmm.
country, which I think people have just started campaigning for in a big way. So
Yeah.
that and the call Peterson made was a top of mind, and I don't know. I feel like I'm being sort of called on my beliefs a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm thinking I might have to step forward and actually get involved somehow. I have even less time than you do.
Hmm.
Like we're speaking here, and this is good, and people are starting to listen, and I hope that we can help change things. But you know, uh, we're sitting alone in a room at night. We're not exactly going out and confronting the dragon. And people who listen to this choose to.
Yeah.
You're not going to be changing hearts and minds with this. You're going to be finding like-minded people and helping develop them, which is a massive thing. But to go out and, well, to bring the enlightened internet mindset to your average normie traditional, you know, political consultant or whatever in your small town or at a larger scale, you might be able to affect more change.
It seems to just boil down to asking rational questions and having the ability to debate competently without stumbling into logical fallacies or to identify logical fallacies.
And not to be put down. Put down's not the
Hmm.
right word, but not to just take, well, I know this to be the case as an answer. It's like, well, no, actually, because I know you're wrong and I'm going to push back onto you. And I'm not going to just accept what you say because you're some kind of authority figure. I think there's something else that's really important while we're on the topic of engaging with people who are, say, arguing in bad faith. You don't have to answer their questions. If you have someone who throws a loaded question at you, the best thing you can do is question their question rather than answering it. If it's a loaded question, just try and answer it without making yourself look too, racist or whatever, which is how the question would be framed if it was going after a conservative. What you want to do is expose the question to the audience, you know. But what you did there was really good. So you're trying to put me in this position that makes me look this way so that you can manipulate the audience that's listening to you into hating me, and then they can vote for you. That's really good. Good job. You're definitely playing the political game there, Mrs. Honest Person.
There's a temptation to that, although I'm not sure if I've got the skill to play that yet.
I think that's more of a me character than you.
Yeah, yeah.
You're very, very good, like breaking apart the the answer to a question that someone else has given and exposing logical fallacies in the way you were talking about before. My brain lit up as like, that is perfect. Perfect for you.
Well, the
Because
scenario.
a person will answer it like you ask them a good deep question and they'll give their blanket, you know, political speech answer, and you can sort of kind of go back and respond with like, you didn't really say anything just there. You said this, which kind of means this, but then you said that, which is just an emotional ploy. You dodged it. It sounded very scripted. You weren't actually thinking, and
Well,
you didn't answer the question. And use this logical fallacy as well, which shows that you're being manipulative.
the way I'd
You know,
envisaged it was sort of being a good faith arguer instead of a bad faith one, and just I wanted to say sort of overwhelming them with good faith argument, but that
you
sounds.
need to not let them get away with the bad faith. Like if you went in there as good faith, and
Hmm.
when they did that, like obviously in that example I just did, I was a bit snarky because that's sort of who I am. But
Yeah.
I could see you sort of standing up there in the sort of autistic way of being like, I'm trying to understand your point and I'm trying to get
Yes.
this
Yes.
laid out,
So
but you're
you're
not
asking
making a
this,
lot of
this, and this?
sense. Like, do you
Yeah.
mean this or do you mean this? And what was this emotional statement you threw in here? It doesn't really fit with the theme. Can you help me understand? Because you haven't really said anything. And that, like, you could do that in a good faith way that would just show up their cards immediately and their falseness would ring straight through.
I wonder if there are any
And
debating
that's,
societies nearby.
I haven't done it since I was a kid. It's like with the one good memory I have of primary, of school, period, was there was, the teacher one day decided to do an experiment in the class. and they did a wee debate session. I think they were probably like looking at alternative teaching styles online or something.
Mm.
And the teacher picked out two debaters from the class, and gave a topic, and then assigned a side to each of them. Like, you didn't get to pick who, and you didn't get to pick what your side was. And then they had all the rest of the class, like, stand in the middle of the room. And then the debaters were on either side. And they had to go back and forth, arguing in rhetoric. And then all the classmates would, like, take steps towards either side of the wall to show who was convincing them and where they ended up at the end of it.
Yeah.
And it was one of my greatest memories of, like, the first time I enjoyed school was, I got picked for one of that, and argued with the person, and I got like everyone on my side, and I was like beaming and happy. I was like 8. I didn't know anything about what I was talking about, but it's not exactly an intellectual exercise that's often practiced in
Mm.
classrooms, and it should be.
Yeah, the value of it's understated.
Yeah, because I didn't believe what I was saying, and I
Mm.
knew that. But the point was that you could make a convincing argument either way, and that to be a person who can convince other people of a thing is incredibly powerful. And more importantly, if you can convince them honestly without deception, or expose the other person's deception, is infinitely more powerful.
Yeah.
We don't need more people in politics doing the bad things for good reasons. We don't need that. What we need is people who are going to come forward and say, I'm not saying a single word that's false. I'm not playing your manipulative games. I'll stand here on the debate stage with you, but if you think I'm going to answer that question as if it was a legitimate question, you can go to hell. We need someone. We need ethical people in politics. And it seems to me that all the ethical people say, oh God, I don't want anything to do with that arena. It's full of unethical people, and I wouldn't make any difference there anyway. I'll go, help someone in therapy, or I'll go be a doctor, or I'll go build this awesome thing, or, oh wow, it's also corrupt, I'll go, run away to the forest. We need people to step forward. We started this project of conversations based on the idea that if you didn't speak, if you didn't have your voice, then you will be silenced, and it will not be pleasant. You go out into the world to speak, or else one day you'll be dragged from your home. And there's no middle ground there. That's just how society seems to work. And it sucks. But that's how it is. And I know that sounds dramatic to people, and they think that there's no way that's true, but it is. Every day that you don't say what you need to say when you hear something in the news or whatever else, and go, oh, that's horrible, but I won't do anything about it, someone else will. You're already on the path to, a Stalinist Russia or a Nazi Germany, because that's how it happened. Everyone stayed silent until they broke down the doors, and it didn't matter if you stayed silent then or not. It was already too late. If you don't stand up and say anything when the consequences are nothing, then how the hell are you going to stand up and say something when the consequences are everything? Just think that through. I won't take the risk when there's no risk, or barely any risk, except for like social ostracism and people looking at me weird, or maybe I have a bad reputation, or I have to have an awkward conversation. If you can't stand up to that, how the hell are you going to stand up to jackfruit thugs? And by the time you do that, it's irrelevant anyway. It's too late. Because they don't care what you have to say, and no one's going to listen to you because they don't want to get dragged off to. And we're doing this project, and it's good, and I'm hoping it's going to help things in the right direction.
Uh,
But maybe it's not enough. Maybe we need to actually do something.
I'm just thinking of how uh, some of the rhetoric that's thrown around these days of words of violence and the
Hmm.
idea that I'd had that I needed to, uh, that in order to become strong, I needed to be able to uh, awaken the potential for physical violence. I'm not saying that's not a component of the necessary growth, but that the fire of verbal conflict, not just the sort of friendly, enjoyable debate that I've had with friends where, uh, like engineering students making up crazy death ray schemes type things and trying to play with the physics and oh you're wrong because of this, like that's everyone's working to the same end. But the sort of
Mm.
debates like looking up a local debating society or something like Toastmasters for
Yeah, where
public
you
speaking,
actually
but
have someone hostile against you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because you can. We've had great debates, and you can have great debates, but when you're, but they're not really debates; they're more conversations because you have the same end goal in mind. But
Yeah.
when you get into a real debate, the other person might not be looking at what's true. They might be looking at winning, and then you do not have a shared interest, and it is 100% a fight. I think it's interesting that you said the thing about people stating that words of violence, because I feel that's a little bit of the quiet part said out loud phenomena of
What?
well, that's what they're
Oh,
doing.
yeah.
Like the constant complaining about, you can't say hateful things, hate speech. This idea that words can be violence, that words can be hateful. It's like, yeah, that's because that's what you're doing. You're admitting it to everyone. I'm using words as violence. I'm using words in a hateful way against you. It's
Oh,
admission.
that'd be a turnaround for in a
Words
debate.
are
It's like,
violence.
words are violence.
Words
Well,
are
yes, you are
violence.
certainly being very violent today, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, because you're admitting you have to, yeah, they're making this claim to the world that everyone needs to accept that words are violence because that's how I'm using them. And if I can use them that way, then that's what they are. You wouldn't think that if you didn't believe it yourself. They honestly believe that. And they honestly believe that because they're using them as weapons. They're not sitting up there going, no, I don't actually think, like, no, they do. They do because they use them against you. Same with the hateful thing. By God, do those people hate you?
Hmm. This is where the disconnection from the game can really become powerful, I think, where
Mm.
rather than feeling sort of beaten down and surprised at where's all this vehemence coming from and anger, I'm not doing anything. It's like you look at it, it's like, your actions don't make sense based on the usual assumptions. What am I missing? And by watching them, it's like you're talking a lot about hate and so on, and you can basically, if you listen to someone, they'll tell you who they are. You don't need
Mm-hmm.
to dive into
Yeah.
their internet history. It's oh,
Yeah.
why like
Yeah.
like
They say
they're
it. They say
they're
it all
trying
plain and
to
clear.
they're trying to find out who people are by monitoring them in every way imaginable, except by just listening to what they're saying. They're trying to use algorithms and tracking and all that sort of stuff and pattern recognition and computers to try and categorize and understand people.
to monitor their attention
Yeah.
because they don't believe that what people say is what they truly believe because they don't use words as a means of truth. My words aren't what I truly believe, they're a tool that I use at my discretion. And therefore, that's the case with everyone else. So if I want to know what they really think, I can't just ask them. They'll lie because I lie. So it must be something else. My whole outward personality is a lie. So what I need to do is know what their inward personality is, because then I can control it. Know what they're really up to.
And then the people who are actually honest, um, and some to some degree self-aware, I wonder if that sort of just short circuits that sort of observation, because if you're honest and self-aware, then you're aware of your attention, and it's not just that nothing new is found, it's that they're I wonder if this is true, that they're tapping into the most easily controlled way of being monitored. Like, if
I
you,
think it would also make sense why they keep doubling down on the wrong people.
in sense of
Because, like, if
confirmation
they don't believe
biases,
that the. No, I mean, in terms of if they don't think that the outward personality is any true reflection of the inward because they've, constructed this deceptive mask, then they think that all people are like that, which would make sense why they keep doubling down on people like Peterson. Because they're like, there's no way that you can be what you present yourself to be. So we're going to show the world that you're not what you think. We're going to show the world that you're actually, weak and scared, because that's what I am.
he had an interview with
And he's
someone.
there like, no, I'm not moving. And they're like, yes, you will, because you're lying, because everyone lies, because I lie. It's like, sure, just keep doubling down and see what happens when you come across someone who really means what they say.
He had an interview where someone had been far left all the way woke, and I think she'd started looking at his stuff because she wanted to find the dirt on him. And now she was having a
Mm,
podcast interview saying, I'm sorry, you were right. I looked
yeah,
at it, I listened,
yeah.
and I became convinced by the truth. Oh. And also as you lie, when you construct a false self to present to the world, it's it's like you're making a mask of colored glass. I'm restating stuff we've already discussed, but it's like you make a
I
mask of
like
colored
that.
glass that changes how people see you, but it also obscures your
Which
vision.
That's good. I like that. That's a really good analogy. Makes me think of the rose tinted glasses line. That there's something about the way you present yourself to others that changes the way that you perceive, which is true. Like, it shouldn't be surprising, but that's such a good formulation. I love that. Well, if
Oh,
if you or anyone else was worried about the kind of people that you'd come up against if you went into, the civic realm, they're not exactly the most impressive or dangerous specimens.
and they put who they really are right out there. It's like every disguise is a self-portrait, to quote from somewhere or other.
Mm,
But
yes. Oh, that's perfect.
yeah, they're if you look past, like they're pointing and yelling, and if you turn around and look at them instead and think, okay, what are you yelling? What are you projecting here? What's the
It's
vision
almost
you're
always a
painting?
self-description.
Yeah, yeah, because you make the tinted glass facade that you want to project, but you also build into
Yeah.
that how
And
you
then you
want to
see the
see
whole
those
world
around
that
you.
way.
Yeah, and
Yeah, but you see the world that way. It's like the feminist thing of always saying that throughout all of human history, men have thought that women are dumb and stupid. It's like, no, that's you, because you believe all women should act and behave like men. So therefore, that's what you think. Was it Freedom Tunes had a great bit about this? He had a sketch about him sitting on a park bench with a guy who kept accusing him of things, and he'd just be like, "No, no, that's you. That's you." And the guy was like, "Oh shit, it is." All the way up to like, "Oh, I hate my dad," and it's like, "Yeah, that makes so much sense." Um,
What was it? And all the
but it's truly the case.
oh,
It's
there was it.
that was always my greatest example. I was arguing with my grandmother, and she was talking about the idea of like dumb, subservient housewives and being nothing more than this, than that. It's like, I never said anything about that. That came all from you. That you believe that, you know, not
Yeah,
me. You.
and the way that like the prime example is what was it? People who talk about not transitioning minors or no, that was it. People who speak out against pedophilia or minor attracted persons to the way they're flaunting
Yeah.
themselves these days, or child trafficking, are called homophobic and transphobic.
Yes, I remember that. I remember that. Yeah, they called them transphobic if you're against the sexualization of children. And you're like, hold on, I didn't make that association between the transgender movement and the sexualization of children. You did. That's all on you.
That's
And you're right. That
that's
is what you're doing.
yeah, the tinted glass. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like you just had a little Freudian slip there, buddy. We heard you.
I feel like it's not quite Freudian slip because that's like putting the wrong word in, where this is like putting the wrong concept in, or like your lives become your
Freudian
reality.
slip is accidentally saying the truth.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, yeah, in a broader sense.
That's how I always interpreted that. Was like,
Hmm.
I meant to say a thing, but what I actually said was the truth, and I didn't recognize that, but someone listening could. Like it's the unconscious slipping in a slice of reality where the conscious doesn't notice, the ego, whatever.
Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. You always speak your truth. Whether the words become your truth or whether your truth becomes the words, it doesn't matter. What you speak
Ooh,
is your truth. And if you put mix lies in, then you poison the well, so to speak. But the words you speak
you
will
can't
always be
tell the
your
difference.
truth. And like the accusations of pedophilia, no, the association of anti transitioning of children and pedophilia and such, it's I'm getting the words a bit mixed up there, but that association is like speaking their truth. Like that association is in their truth, and it's just as
Yeah, it
true.
came from them.
Yeah, it's just as true to them as the this person is being hateful, and just as true to them as the lies they're telling. And the fact that some part of your brain recognizes that you are saying falsehoods doesn't change the fact that other parts of your brain can't tell the difference.
Yeah, because you've categorized it under thing I believe,
Yeah. Or
because you stated it as
yeah,
your belief out loud to other people. You made an
yeah.
affirmation.
It's almost like there's parts of the self that are entirely built from how we present ourselves. It's circular.
Mm.
You are who you pretend to be.
any part of the consciousness has interactions with all the other parts. So you
Mm.
can build a persona and show it to the world, and you act upon this persona, but you're fooling yourself if you're thinking it's not acting on you. Wear a mask for too long, you forget you're wearing one. And even if you don't, it'll stain your face in some way or another. Words aren't tools that can be manipulated to get your own end. They're the defining nature of reality in terms of you. And when you use words in a manipulative way to change your world for you, you change those words and you change you. You don't get to play games with them and get away with it. It has a cost. And the cost is they don't mean what they meant before. And you're not the same as you were before.
Ooh. And the more you can understand the words that you and others are saying, the more high definition you get into your reality. Like if you can take a statement and deconstruct it logically and work out what is being said and not said in that statement, and similarly produce a statement where you know exactly what is said and not said, then you exist more. That's an interesting idea. That you
When
ex
your words when your words are more in touch with reality, then so are you. But when you use words for your own manipulative or self-centered way, and they're false, then you construct a fake world for yourself, because we're all living in a representation of the real world inside our head. Every human being. We don't live in the real world, we live in our representation of it.
mm.
And if you use words falsely, you falsify your representation. And then you're living in a fake world.
Well,
You're not
even
in the real world.
even more than that, like I'm playing with the concept of you speak yourself into existence, in the sense that, well, almost in the biblical sense of Genesis, like God spoke words and brought the world into existence. By speaking, you bring yourself into existence, and in an ongoing sense, you continually create and recreate yourself by speaking. So,
That's the
yeah,
process of centroversion.
centroversion.
That's the process in which centroversion. Yeah, it's the process in which the ego consciousness, which is you, effectively, as everyone considers us, integrates the different parts of the psyche and extracts out information from the unconscious and becomes greater and greater towards the full and incorporated self. But if you corrupt that process through lies, then you end up, by lying, pushing parts back into unconsciousness, which means you are unwilling yourself from existence. Your statement of true words speak you into existence is factually true. As you engage with the world and engage in truthful dialogue and engage in introspection as well, you bring more parts of you out from the shadow and out from the unconscious and out from the persona and into the animus particularly and into yourself. You become more real and more in touch with the reality, and particularly with the map of the world. You become more you and more real. But if you invert that process through lying, then you are, in essence, practicing repression, and you're pushing down things into the unconscious, and you're making yourself smaller and less here and prone to invasion from the unconscious, which is let's say unpleasant and leave it at that.
And then you're making yourself weaker and more predictable because someone who understands those same currents
Yeah,
can
you
then,
make yourself a smaller thing.
yeah, they can play you like a drum.
It's like, yeah, it's like the ideologue. You know
Hmm.
everything they're going to say because they've made their personality so unbelievably small in their consciousness, and everything outside of that is shoved into unconsciousness.
I'm just
And
really,
that's exactly why they don't act out anything they believe, because they're not ruled by themselves anymore. They're ruled by their emotions and by the unconscious, which makes them, I don't want to say less of a person, but quite literally, yes, less here,
I'm just,
living in their fake world and smashing into the real world every now and then.
yeah, I'm really excited by the potential it feels like to. Oh, I said it before, but it's grabbed onto me that by understanding my own speech better, and in essence saying more with less because I understand precisely what I am saying. And I'm thinking of,
Making words is sacred.
yeah, but I'm thinking specifically of, I've got a book that introduces logic in the diagrammatic analytical sense. Like, how do you present a logical argument in terms of describe its structure using the specific symbols defined in pure logic, which appeals to my analytical mind. But the ability to not just go with the flow of a conversation and get better at that, which I guess would relate to like dancing instinctively, like learning the
Mm.
steps to the and learning certain fixed routines to the point where you can then mix and match them. It's like you learn the rules well enough that you can break them. The best writers break the rules of
They
writing.
make the rules.
Yeah, they
The best writers
remake.
make the rules.
Yeah,
Yeah, they change the structure.
yeah. So you
Well,
understand
yeah,
the structure.
it's the music of the spheres.
Yeah, and then by doing that, you become more defined. You speak yourself into a sharper existence. It's like going from low definition to high definition in terms of existence, given time, of course. But yeah, it's not just you become more, because that just implies more expansive, but you become more detailed. You become like you go from a blurry
You become
picture.
more real.
Yeah, I guess that is it. Yeah. It's
I think it's true that you could say you become more real, or more in touch with reality, in and greater simultaneously.
There was a quote I remember. This was in a metaphysical context, but it was there's no point trying to fight someone who's more aligned to God, the will of the universe, than you. And if we pull that out of the metaphysical context, it's like there's. It feels like it still has an
Hmm.
application, although I'm having trouble getting rid of the metaphysical language in it. It's like God in this context
Um,
was like the universe in the Peterson
I
sense.
would say, I would say, as an interpretation of that is, there's not much point arguing with someone who has incorporated more of reality than you. Like, you can have all the greatest points in the world, but if the person you're arguing with has all of that and more, as in, like, their personality is expansive and structured well enough to incorporate a large part of yours, then you're not going to get anywhere.
It's like trying to argue with a physics professor as an undergrad. It's like you can,
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, I can deal with all of these things, but I can also go so far beyond that that it dwarfs anything you could say.
And I know what you know, and I know every way that that's wrong because you don't understand. You can't
Yeah,
conceptualize of the ways that are more right yet.
yeah, I think I've had this in sometimes when I've got into arguments with people where I've sort of looked at them and thought like, I'd have to explain to you, you know, the thesis or main point of like 15 books to get you educated enough to the point where you can see how you're wrong. But I can't educate you in the next 15 minutes. Like it's not going to happen. And I can't reduce it down to some tiny little soundbite to get, some gotcha clap back. If someone is operating on a grander scale than you're not going to outdo them. I think your analogy of the professor versus the undergrad is good. It's like a smart 12-year-old arguing with the teacher. It's like you can make some good points and maybe even put up a good argument, but you don't stand a chance.
I don't like the undergrad, the sorry, 12-year-old and the teacher, because sometimes teachers sh should be not really
Okay.
teaching that.
Okay, agreed. I did have some of that, but I was thinking of a particular kid who I got into arguments with when I was the janitor at the school, and it was like a preppy rich boy school. Um, and he was like, smart 12, 14-year-old making the flying spaghetti monster argument. And I was like, well, you're really smart for your age, but like you have no idea the the world of knowledge that you're putting your toe into, and you think that your one simple statement um, addresses any of the, you know, I don't know, entire fields of studies in which you're criticizing.
Hmm.
You know, like the flying spaghetti monster argument is going to have any kind of competition at all with, say, people who've been studying theology for like the past 500 years. They have so much knowledge that you're not aware of. It's the unknown unknowns thing.
Yeah.
When a person first starts into a new field, it's like, oh, I know so much. It's like, you have no idea how much you don't know yet because you don't know anything.
Well, it's like
Mm.
unknown unknowns feels like it's not a big enough statement for us. It's unknown categories of unknowns.
Yeah, it's unknown orders of magnitude of unknowns. When you had the statement of it's hard to argue with someone who's more in touch with the universe than you. What I got in my mind was an image of a circle within a larger circle, where it's like this little circle is like I'm making my point, and it's inside like an ocean-sized circle. That's like, okay, I have to expand your level of knowledge drastically to show you how you're wrong.
So,
But because you have this tiny little circle that only encompasses what you know, that makes you arrogant. You're not open to that.
so if you have a debate between two people, to sort of pull it down a bit more into
Mm.
experienced reality or whatever, um,
Practical.
yeah, that's the term. You're talking to someone, you don't know which of those you are, and either of the two can be arrogant. And it could be that you are of similar magnitude but differing in border. I'm just trying to think of a generalized approach, if there is one, to.
Okay. Here's a good rule of thumb. Um, just because you may operate on a larger scale doesn't mean you have the same clarity.
Yeah,
And I think that's probably a pretty general principle. If you are a big picture kind of person, you're not likely to also be a detail kind of person. So even if the person you're talking to is a small scale person, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to learn something from them, because they might have a really good handle on the particular thing that they're about. And vice versa. There's positives and negatives to both. Not one is better than the other inherently. In terms of knowing, you should always approach a conversation as if you could learn from the other person. But in terms of debate, yeah, that's a harder square to circle. Whatever, circle to square.
Do you want to go into it trying to win, to sort of question the base assumption?
Well, yeah, it's devils in the details. It depends. You know, what's at stake? What's the point of this? You know, if you go into a presidential debate and you're not trying to win, I don't know if that's helpful. But you can't let your desire to emerge victorious corrupt you into using your language as a manipulative weapon. Otherwise, you're defeating your own purpose, assuming your purpose is to try and reduce the amount of people in, say, the political arena who are doing that. You don't change the game by playing it.
I wonder if taking it rather than seeing it as a field where you are trying to win, more like you have chosen champions in a slightly medieval tournament sense. And each debater prepares their champions to the best of their ability and then presents them on the field of battle. And you want to see whose champion will win. And if your champion, which is your concept,
I don't like
loses.
that.
Hmm? Well,
I don't like this analogy.
the I'm trying to take the point off the individual winning. It's not me versus you. It's my concept versus your
Yeah, but it
concept.
is. No, but it is, though. If you're going up in a debate against someone, you can tell yourself all day and night about, oh, I'm not here to win. Like, yeah, but you are. Like, that's why you're here.
But not through falsehood.
It feels like, yes, agreed. But it feels like self-deception to say, oh, I'm not trying to win. I'm just here to speak the truth. It's like, no, you're here to win, but you're doing it by speaking the truth, and you won't allow yourself to do other things. And I don't know, the champions thing just made me feel a bit like a door to falseness of, you know, I've constructed this thing that's not me, it's that thing, and then that thing's going to go and argue. It feels, I don't know.
So then what happens when you find that you were wrong? Because it'll happen.
You admit it.
So you just take it as,
You
that's my loss. You win.
you take that as ethical as possible. Someone makes a good point, or whatever else, and it's like, you take it. You go, actually, that's good. I like that. You're right about that. Because it shows that you're willing to learn.
Yeah, and if you can take the loss, so to speak,
You know,
then I'm just thinking of, like, in a physical equivalent, the sore loser loses obviously. The gracious loser can walk away from a loss like a champion. Does that make sense?
yeah, you don't want to be. You don't want to be. You don't want to appear to be the kind of person who would throw away valuable information for your pride. You don't want to be the guy who's like, no, that can't be true because I'm the only one who's ever right. you make yourself smaller by doing that. You want to be the bigger person at a debate. That doesn't mean the weaker, but it means the bigger person. And what that means is, when something like that happens, you go, you know what, that's good. I like that. That's good. You're right. I see that I was wrong about this point and that you're right about that point, and I'm going to change my position based on that. And now you've just taken the gun out of their hand. And it's like, oh, this point that we disagreed on, actually, you're right. And now I'm going to change my policy to do that, except I'm going to make this or this tweak that's going to make it better than yours for this reason. But I thank you for bringing that up and for challenging my position. And it's good to see that there's this one, at least, that was not on the ball. But now that I've rectified that, I appreciate your help in making my, platform of policy better.
And I guess that would be the approach
As
to
a snarky
take.
example.
Yeah. Just thinking of a scenario where if you go to a public debate where some politician's up on stage and the microphone gets handed around and you stand up and ask your carefully worded question and they come back with something and you don't have time to dive into a full debate and you only 50% understand what they said and you tease it apart and you don't win as in you beat them, but you don't really lose either because it's not that kind of environment. But the winner as such isn't decided until you've dissected it and comprehended it fully, and then you can decide whether or not they had a good point or not.
And it's not just about having the greatest logical points and arguments. That's that thing about facts don't care about your feelings. It's like, well, yeah, but feelings don't care about your fact. It doesn't matter. In that kind of scenario, you don't have long to respond. You didn't really, whatever. What you want to be is the one who's differentiated from the others. It'd be a good moment to levy a criticism at the structure of the debate in general, or about the archaic medium that people are using, that the system is forcing people to use in terms of campaigning, or the bias of the question, or the standard political response of everyone else at the table. I think that's in some ways comes back to the harmless versus not thing. If you're always sort of, I want to say acting in good faith, but there's something about it sort of being a bit, I don't know. Unassuming. Assuming everyone else is playing ethical games and behaving as if that's the case. Like, it's all well and good to be the ethical person at the table, but you can't, in that perception,
If you're the
construction
only
of the environment.
Yeah, if you're the only
Yeah, you
ethical one,
can't
you'll
play it as
lose.
if everyone else is. No, you can be the ethical one, but you can't play it as if everyone else is. You can't sit there and go, oh, well, we're all doing this together and this is a great enterprise and I'm going to do my best. You can be the ethical person, but say, like, everyone else at this table is not behaving ethically and neither is the moderator and neither is the way this is set up. And that can be an ethical statement.
Yeah, and that then gets to sort of
yeah,
you're
toothless
rejecting
person
the
can't do that.
you're rejecting the assumption in a sense. You're
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. A question has a set of assumptions and almost a worldview built into it. And by answering it, you're accepting those set of assumptions and you're accepting the framing. Whereas if you flip it on its head and go after the question, you expose that framing. Like, you've asked this question, but what you really do is trying to put me into a corner where I say, something like this or this in which you can pin me for it. And that shows that you're acting in bad faith,
And then
rather than like trying to do your best to cobble together an answer.
that then would come across as uh, this might just be internal resistance on my part, but then you're a sort of combative debater. You're being difficult. You're
You know, everyone else at the table is not being combative in a political debate.
yeah, true. But
I mean,
there's
I'm sure you looked at the last presidential debates last time round. They were not, you know, all people getting together in good faith.
it's just
It
making
was
me
it
think of
was a knife fight.
the guy who rejects the authority of the court that he's on trial within.
Mm. Yeah. Or a good example would be those early interviews of Peterson, where he's on some kind of talk show, and there's all these kinds of people levying their stupid little accusations, and then he'll make some kind of statement that is clear to everyone in the audience. That is, I am above all of you. Like, this game you're playing is obvious. Everyone can see it, and I'm going to call it out in such a way that every single person in the room can see now that you're all playing this stupid little game, and I am greater than it.
Hmm. So, but rather than
And
standing up there
you
and
discredit
declaring,
everyone. Yeah, you
yeah,
do it in an honest way.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's discrediting, you know.
it's not standing there saying I am better than you. It's pointing out there is a flaw, and it's not saying
Yeah,
I am better than this flaw. It's
yeah.
yeah,
Here is a problem with this way this is run, and every other person at this table is bought into it.
hmm,
You're not so much as going, I'm better than all of them, but you're pointing at them and going, you, smart, intelligent audience member, can clearly see if you look at what I'm pointing at, that all these people are playing a rather small and petty game. And that instantly exposes them as not the great people that they're proclaiming themselves to be. Because these people stand up in front of the nation and say, I'm so great, vote for me. And they're playing these tiny, petty, manipulative games and lying through their teeth the whole time. And even simply by engaging in the format, they're they're putting themselves as beneath the format, which is clearly stupid, and anyone who watches it at home knows that. When no one looks at politics, we all look at it and go, "What? This is a joke." And I think why a majority of people don't vote. But if you had someone who's like, "I'm, this is clearly a joke. Everyone knows it's a joke, and you actually expect me to answer this question,"
it's just
that
making me
that
think
is
of
the
Winston
illusion.
Peters.
Um, I don't know too much about him, but from what I've heard, that tracks.
Yeah, just that
That
he
he made some
will.
bad calls though in the end.
Yeah, he's possibly getting on a bit, but the impression I'm working off here is that he will. Oh, he got a reputation of being hard to interview from journalists because he would do this. He would call out the journalists on their questions. He would not just answer the questions. Um, he would call out all the little flaws, and it seemed to work well for him in politics, where he was like the comeback kid of New Zealand politics, where he would be down and out, and then he'd be back, and it's like you can never quite count him out because he'll always have another way back into the arena, and he'll
Yeah.
it's not bare
You
knuckle
don't let
politics.
people that you don't respect put you on the defensive. Yeah, you don't need to justify and defend yourself against allegations from people who you know are full of shit. You know, because otherwise you give their allegations credence. You give it credit. You know, when someone keep using Peterson as an example, he's a great example of the people who abuse his character, and he just sort of looks at them and goes,
Yeah,
"No, I'm not gonna." even justify that question. And here's all the problems with it. And clearly you're just trying to do this. And the point is, if I tried to defend myself, I would say, this question has merit. And I'm putting myself beneath it. I'm what? Subserving myself? Something like that to it.
Yeah. The bit that really drives that home is the way that he's got so much uh, time of him speaking up on the internet because he started out by videoing his university lectures and putting them up, and then that exploded and so on. And so there are so many hours of him saying stuff in reasonably ad hoc settings that if he'd said anything that was truly detrimental, it would have been clipped and reproduced and spread around, and everyone who hated him would have jumped on it and crucified him with it. But they haven't been able to find anything that stuck. And every time they thought they found something, he pointed out, yeah, that was a 5 hour interview, and that was 2 minutes of it taken way out of context. And here's the whole
Well,
interview.
and that's why it didn't stick. Because they found plenty of things that they could use. And they had a good go at him for it. But he never engaged with it or apologized. He just ignored it. And then it went away. And kept doing his thing.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
It wasn't going to cut.
The not
Yeah.
apologizing. Even if you're
Yeah, you don't even need to acknowledge it. It's like, there's this massive scandal involving you. It's like, look, there's nothing wrong with what I've done. Clearly, obviously. And I'm not even going to attempt to defend myself. And it's kind of ridiculous that you'd even ask me this question because you clearly know the facts of the case because you're a damn journalist. So how dare you come at me with this contrived and constructed criticism that you know to be false in order to imbue my reputation with the general public? And you should be ashamed of yourself and go and, sit in a monastery for the next 15 years until you wash your soul clean.
I'm just thinking of a journalist who tried to come up at him with what was it? Women had it bad in the past. Everyone had it bad in the past. And
Yeah. How about war, mate?
yeah.
And that that thing I found out recently, which is interesting. The big for years men have been in charge of society and we've been in a patriarchy and that's so bad and isn't that evil and oppressive? Like, okay, sure. Did you know that before that it was a matriarchy? Was that bad and oppressive too? No? Oh, so you don't have a problem with one dominating the other, which we're not doing, by the way. But even if that was the case, as you so claim, you don't actually have a problem with that. You just have a problem that your particular group isn't the one in power, which says a lot about you and probably a lot about your political opinions. So I'm not really going to engage with you anymore.
Yeah.
I think at the end of all of this, I think it needs to be said. And we started this project by saying that people need to stand up and speak. And I think, particularly there's elections coming up everywhere over the Western world this year, and even in general, there's a growing sense amongst the internet age youth, whatever it is you want to call it, of spiritual, intellectual, and emotional development. We are far beyond our predecessors at this age. And there's been a massive movement towards self-development and self-improvement.
Mm.
And I think it's time that we come out of the shadows. We've been sitting along, improving ourselves and educating ourselves and getting healthy and thinking better and exposing the lies for what they are to ourselves in the world and fixing ourselves and escaping from the corruptions and lies of the culture just for ourselves. And now it's about time that I think people like us come forward and do something
That's
and
going to
help
be
others.
That's going to be an interesting time when the all the people who've been putting in that work stand up and speak, because
Mm,
when they do, in numbers, like
in numbers.
they will be doing it powerfully, cautiously, but with confidence,
Mm,
because that's what they've been building for the past how many years. And it won't be the confidence of I've talked myself into being arrogant. It will be the confidence of I've been working on myself for the past decade and think that what I have to say is worth saying, and so I will say it.
yeah, and that people from the Heterodox Academy, we educated ourselves. All right, we didn't go to your elite institutions where you tell us what to think. We figured it out ourselves, and we have a pretty good handle of what's going on and of the games you're playing.
Hmm.
I think it's about time that we came forward and made a change. And I think it needs to be everyone, everyone in a small way.
Hmm.
We keep abdicating this responsibility and saying better people will do it. And I keep looking around and going, you know what? Whatever this weird spirit that is of self development and individualism that's cropped up in the internet age, I think it's well beyond anything I see around. Now, you can be afraid of the consequences of your actions. I'm sure we've gone over that plenty, and we've stepped through a bunch of stuff today about qualms and concerns and traps. But at the end of the day, if you don't step forward and take responsibility to make this place better, then those who want power over you will. And you know as well as we do that they have been doing that for a wee while. And it's not going so well. And we've been sitting here watching them and pointing at them and going, oh, that's bad. We know better. Oh, what should we do? We'll vote. Not enough. Because those people run for the school boards. Those people get in the local councils. Those people get on the district health boards. And they affect change. They get in HR departments. They get into professional associations to help shut people out. They took the responsibility because we abdicated it. Now, well, we didn't abdicate it. In general, it was the generations before us. But if we don't try and wrestle that control now, who's going to do it? You know, we sit in this age and go, oh, we're young. You know, regardless of how old we are, we're young. Leading's for the older people. That's not us. It's always the older people that lead. It's like it really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be, because they're several generations removed from what's going on. And if they're not and they're young, the likelihood is they're seeking power and authority to manipulate over others. And you don't want that in your local council, let alone your school board or your national government. And we've all clearly seen that's what's happened. So we can cry and bitch about it on the internet and go, oh, isn't this bad? Look at what X person did today. We can do something about it. You know, I'm sure when you've gone for your shopping, you've seen the local office of whatever political party. I don't think which one it is particularly matters if you're not going to corrupt yourself, because you could walk into the worst one possible and say, I'd like to help. And they'll say, well, we need you to do these things. And I'm like, I'm not doing that because I don't believe in this, this, or this, or this. And at least you'll have a confrontation and help change the needle on public perception.
It would almost be worth finding out where, like, pick a reasonable range of them, say three or four. Yeah, four would be good. The center left, the center right, the further left, the further right. If you pick four of them, just the local officers, to say, I'm looking to get involved in local politics. And they'll each make the assumption that because you came to them, you agree with them. And then you can do a little bit with each of them and expand your perspective and see, oh, so that's the way they're thinking. Oh, I never got that insight into the mindset of that party
Mm.
before. And that'd be valuable.
I think there's something there. You could also help move the needle. If we all go to one side and reform that, then that's great. You have a great position. But it also means that the opposition side is pathetic and old and probably only gets more insane because of the brain drain problem.
Hmm.
And then also you don't have a good challenger to help keep you in check. What we really need is both parties to be reformed and aimed at the good to keep each other in check. We don't just need to reform one side and then take power and rule forever. Hey, final Reich. That doesn't work. Doesn't matter how benevolent you are. You need both parties to be in good, healthy standing. So whether you're a left-leaning person or a right-leaning person listening to this, go to your party of choice and make them sane.
There's also an argument to be made for going to exactly the opposite side because from
Moderate them.
well, moderate them and sharpen your blade on their anvil. Like if you go
Mm.
to if you go to who you would consider the opposition party and say, I've been interested in getting involved in local politics, I'm just wanting to dip my toe in the waters. You not don't profess political allegiance, but just listen to them and say, and be ignorant in the sense of honest ignorance, in the sense so you can ask questions and, oh, you're saying this, but what about this? And what about that? And oh, so you're saying it's this way, and
Mm.
oh, that's interesting. But what about that? And just not so much trying to change them, but practice
Socratic
bring
style.
yeah, but practice bringing the spirit of truth with you
Mm.
because like you might be wrong in your current political leanings or you might be missing things or whatever, but bringing the spirit of truth with you, true inquiry, you you will benefit from practicing implementing that and they will benefit from having it implemented around them.
I think. Okay. Yes. I agree. You said something about being wrong with your current political opinions, and I wanted to make the point of that's not how politics in a democracy works. There isn't one right final answer.
That's true.
You, a nation is a tightrope walker, holding a weight in each hand.
Hmm. Just like the
It
judicial
needs to
system with
be,
two lawyers.
yeah, it's a scale, it's a balance. You have it too far to one side, you fall off a cliff. You have it too far to the other side, you fall off a cliff. Each side has its valid purpose in checking the other. One isn't right and the other wrong. If you think that your side is always right and the other always wrong, you're not right. And you're going to do more damage than good. It's a balanced system. Things go too far this way, you need a voice from that side to pull it back, and vice versa. And from many different directions, which is why you can have a nation like ours with many different parties. Not that it's helpful. I think, I think, yeah, I'd like to make the call to action. Go, get involved, help, and don't pledge allegiance to any party. Be willing to switch, because if you look at the last wee while, you can see that the parties can change dramatically from what they were to what they are now. You don't want to be pledging allegiance to any group. You want to be pledging allegiance to the truth and the spirit of moral action. And if that means that party affiliation needs to change, then that's what that means. And you shouldn't feel guilt or remorse for abandoning some kind of collective group with that. So go out, get involved, and help make the world a better place. Because if you don't, someone else will go out and get involved and do everything they can to make it worse on purpose.
Well, that cheery thought, shall we call it a night?
Yeah, I think that'll do. We call to action. I hope
Yeah.
I hope this helps people. And I actually hope people go out and do something because we need some more sanity in our system.
Yeah.
It's time for a change, and apparently it was predicted a long time ago. So we'll see how that plays out.
Hmm. Oh, well. Good night.
Good night, everyone.